Hello, Paul Campbell here again. Today I'm going to talk about audio, specifically about how I connect this microphone to the C100. Now before I start, I need to say a few words about microphones generally. There are two types of microphones, dynamic and the rest. Now the rest are generally condenser microphones. Now the Shure SM7B is a dynamic microphone. And this is a condenser microphone, the MXL 990. You can't really tell by looking at them whether they're dynamic or condenser. But the main difference between them is that the dynamic microphone produces a voltage all on its own. It produces a voltage while it's sitting in the box. It works basically in the same way as an electric generator, but on a micro scale. If there's a sound, it's producing a voltage. The condenser microphone, on the other hand, has electronics inside to make it work, and these electronics require power. In early days, that power was supplied by a separate cable from a power supply. These days, of course, it's supplied along the microphone cable, and it comes from the audio equipment. Now, because there's no visible power supply, this has come to be known as phantom power. Now the thing about this, as far as we're concerned, is that on your audio equipment there is probably either a switch or a setting to turn on phantom power. It might be marked phantom power, or it might simply say plus 48 volts as it does on the C100. If you don't turn on phantom power and you're using a condenser microphone that requires it, then you won't get any sound from your microphone, and that can be inconvenient. Condenser microphones that don't use XLR type connectors generally supply their own power through batteries, like the Rode video mic. So, how do we connect the microphone to the camera? Well, let's take a look under this one. You can see that it has a socket here with 3 pins in it. This is an XLR connector. Most studio microphones and microphones for video generally are of the XLR connector type. This is an XLR cable. It's a fairly stout cable, and it has great big connectors on the ends. It's designed to carry balanced signals which avoid picking up noise. It's also a very robust design, and the connectors are very carefully designed so that you can connect things together in the dark, because you can't put them together the wrong way. Now there are 2 types of connectors, male with pins and female. The male connector is an output, and the input connectors are female. So the microphone generally, if not always, has a male connector. The inputs on the C100 handle are female. Now they fit together, as I said, only in one way. There's a key on here, and there's a slot in here, so that you can't put them together incorrectly. They'll only go together one way. Now the female connector has a locking tab. You push them together and they will click together. To take them apart, then you have to press on that tab and it will release. So let's plug the female end of the cable into the microphone. The other end goes into your audio equipment. Let's take a look at the handle of the C100 where the audio is housed. There's a stereo microphone built into the front. On one side there are 2 XLR inputs, channel 1 and channel 2. And on the other side there are 2 control panels, one for each channel. Now before we start, make sure that the handle cable is securely connected to the camera body, otherwise you won't get any sound. Let's connect our cable to the XLR input. As I said, it can only go in one way. The little hole on the outside lines up with the tab on the socket. And as I say, it's just not possible to connect it incorrectly. To remove the connector, press the tab on the socket and pull it out. Now we're going to leave it plugged in, obviously. Now look at the control panel on the other side. We plugged into channel 1, so look at the left panel for channel 1. Starting at the bottom. First switch is for INT versus EXT, that is internal microphone versus external microphone. Now we have plugged in an external microphone, so we'll have this switch set to EXT. If you're using only one microphone, there is a setting in the menu which will output this to both channels and disable channel 2. We'll have a look at that shortly. Now next up is a 3-position switch for line, mic, and mic plus 48 volts. Line is for amplified sources such as a sound desk or an amplifier. We won't use it here. Mic is for a dynamic microphone that does not need power supplied. And mic plus 48 volts is for a mic that needs phantom power. Now we're using a dynamic microphone here, the Shure SM7B, so we'll leave that switch set at mic. Next up we have to choose between A and M. A for automatic, M for manual. If you're in a hurry and you can't tell what your levels are going to be, choose A. It's preferable though, if you have the time, to use the manual setting. On top of the handle, there are dials for setting the levels. Now, it has to be said that these dials are a little hard to adjust. Your finger is usually too big, it'll cover the dial and you can't see what you're doing. Now, I have found that using the eraser end of a propelling pencil, you can make very fine adjustments to the dials, as you can see here. Now you adjust the dials while looking at the audio meters on the display here on the bottom right. Talk into the microphone at the distance you'll be using it and watch the levels. Reciting Mary Had a Little Lamb is useful. Adjust the dial so that the meter goes up to, well, this is an interesting point. If we look at the C100 manual, and this recommendation appears elsewhere as well, you should be aiming for around the -18 dB mark. I did record at this level, or trying to get this level, and I found it just too low. You can pull it up in post, but I had to pull it up an awful lot to get to the recommended level for YouTube. So I prefer to have the sound bouncing between the 20 and the 10. Perhaps going just beyond the 10 on occasion, but mostly in between 20 and 10. But, healthily bouncing up towards that 10 mark. I find that this gives us a decent result for post-processing. Now, if you go too high on the sound levels, you risk distortion. If your sound levels turn out to be a little low, you can always pull them up in post. But if you've got distortion, your sound is ruined. Nothing much you can do. So generally, it pays to be conservative. Don't go anywhere near that right-hand end where that little red marker is. Now note that the C100 records 2 channels, stereo if you like. If only one external mic is connected, that will provide 1 channel on a stereo track. If the second channel is set for internal mic, then this will be recorded on the other track. In post, it's easy to set both stereo tracks to the same input. However, there is a menu setting which will record channel 1 input to both channels, with channel 2 input being ignored. Now here's how we do it. We go into the menu system, we go down to the audio menu, and across to audio input. Then we go down to XLR rec channel. It's normally set to channel 1, CH1. We have the choice of channel 1 or channel 1, channel 2. We change it to channel 1, channel 2 and exit the menu system. The input on channel 1 will now be recorded to both channel 1 and channel 2. Now the C100 can be operated without a handle. A microphone with a 3.5mm jack plug can be attached here. This is the Rode video mic. It's a condenser microphone with an internal battery supplying its power. Now setting the levels when we've got this connected has to be done within the menu. If you haven't got the handle on, you can't use the dials on the handle. So this is how that works. Now to set the levels on the Rode video mic, we have to go into the menu system. So we go into the menu, down to the audio menu, down to inputs, and here we can see that we can set the inputs to automatic or manual levels. We choose manual. We now go down to levels, and here we see the levels meter, and we can adjust the levels here to our satisfaction. And when we're done, out we go, and we're ready to shoot. Now, as I've said earlier, this is a dynamic microphone, the Shure SM7B. It produces a fairly low level of signal. Now, sometimes it might be too low for your purposes. If that's the case, what you can do is to put an inline preamplifier between the microphone and the sound equipment. Now this one is a cloud lifter. It's a CL1. It has XLR connectors at the end. You plug one end into the microphone, the other end into your sound equipment or camera, and it will boost the level of the signal. You don't really need it in this situation because, and I'm not using it, and I'm getting quite a decent signal, quite a decent level without it. One thing to note though is that if you're using this, you're going to need phantom power because this contains electronics and it needs power to drive it. If you don't connect phantom power, if you don't select phantom power, you'll find you're not getting any signal at all from your mic. And as I've said before, that can be inconvenient. Now, sometimes you may not want to record directly to your camera, and you might want to record to a portable sound recorder like this. This is the Zoom H5. This has been around for years. It's a very well-known piece of gear and very useful. Runs on a couple of AA batteries. This will supply phantom power if required. It has a pair of XLR connectors on the bottom and dials to set your levels. These dials are very nice to use. They move smoothly, they're damped, so you can get an accurate level. It records to a SD card. You just pull this out when you're finished and transfer the file to your computer. The only problem with doing this is that you're going to have to find some way of synchronizing your sound to your audio. Sorry, you're going to have to find some way of synchronizing your sound to your video. It's already synchronized to your audio. Now, one way to do this is to record on the internal mics on the C100 at the same time. Then you can use that scratch track to synchronize the two audios together. That's easy to do in DaVinci. Now, the oldest and easiest way to synchronize sound is to make a short, sharp sound like this. That will show on the soundtrack as a spike, and it'll be easy to match that with the vision. You can also use something like this, or a clapperboard, like they use in the movies. Easy peasy. Well, this has been a fairly introductory talk on audio for the C100. It's very basic. Audio can get very complicated very quickly, especially if you talk to a sound guy or sound girl. You can get lost, totally lost. So if you find this helpful, I'm very pleased. I'll also be pleased if you take the time to subscribe. It takes only a second. And if you do, thank you in advance. So this is Paul Campbell signing off until next time. Goodbye, and may your God go with you if you have one. Until next time.